turf your ego, lose your ego, leave it behind, you will make better decisions, you'll operate better, you'll be happier person if you're able to do that. I see that a lot, is that, there's all of this ego and bluster and so on. The best are these people that just quietly go about their business. They attract and retain better people in their organization. They're probably deep down happier as well.
Welcome to The First. I'm your host, Alex Rankin. Today on The First, we sit down with David Whittle, co-founder of Lexer, a customer data and experience platform helping global brands turn insight into action. From his unconventional path through art, science, and advertising to building a fast-scaling SaaS business, David shares candid lessons on leadership, AI, co-founder dynamics, and why instinct, trust, and a little humor go a long way in building something that lasts. Let's dive in.
David, welcome to the first podcast.
Thanks, Alex.
So I think to start things off, we like to get the founder to talk through the actual company itself. So maybe just give us a bit of a primer on Lexer, what it is, customers, location, etc.
Awesome. Okay, so Lexer is a customer data platform, or a customer data and experience platform. We help consumer brands, principally retailers, do two things: understand who their customers are and then personalize the engagement with them. And we do that so the businesses can, make better decisions and save time and money, improve quality of engagement with the customer. We operate across, Australia, New Zealand, Southeast Asia, North America. We just won our first client in Turkey. We've moved markets. But then the business is founded and they're headquartered out of Melbourne, Australia.
Awesome. So when I was doing the research for this podcast, obviously we have a ton to cover because you've got quite a reputable background yourself, and there's actually quite an interesting journey with Lexer thus far. But in terms of just starting foundations, early upbringings, Sydney, Melbourne, it was a bit confusing when I was looking at it.
So I was born in Kuala Lumpur in the mid-70s, and I went to 8 schools in 3 continents in 12 years. So I travelled a lot as a kid. And moved around a lot with my family. So I don't know how that has impacted who I am and why I am, but that's they're my origins.
I've heard you mention before about a balance between art and science in a couple of areas. Was this in relation or something brought or originated from your parents?
Yeah, it is. My mum's an artist and my dad's a scientist. And so, I don't know, I was probably in my kind of teens that I realised that obviously we're all a product of our families, but that's quite clear in what I'm passionate about and how I think and what I do.
In the teen years, was there any kind of inclination of founding a company? Was there that early bite, or not so much?
Not in my teen years.
Yeah.
No, probably definitely in my very late teens and early 20s, I started to, I had a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. I had a job in a pub. I cut a revenue share deal with the owner. So that was that was the first. That was my first experience in being an entrepreneur in the simplest form.
And so you went on then to get a Bachelor of Commerce and then a Bachelor of Arts at Deakin. We speak to some founders and education is paramount for them. And then we speak to others where it's a means to an end. What was it really for you?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was really important. The commerce and the arts, the combination of both, I found really interesting. I mean, I studied fine art in my arts degree and feminism and sociology and PR. And in my commerce, I did a lot of marketing, but I also did electronic commerce. I think I was the first wave of students in Australia to be able to have an e-commerce education at university, which came with its own downsides. But that's, that was how I combined my tertiary education. And I'm with you. There's like my co-founder, Aaron, tertiary education wasn't a big thing for him. and it doesn't matter. But,
Yeah.
but for some people it is. I don't think it's a one fits all.
And do you think it was at university where you really figured out what you wanted to do next, or was it more of a sort of means to an end? You kind of knew what you wanted going in and you just had to go get the skill set and the pieces.
Yeah, I think when I was in high school, I had this quite defining moment. I went into the computer room. I was late to finish a project, and I went to the computer room to print something. And this is Apple IIe computers, right? And I went to use the mouse on this computer to kind of start up the computer. It was really early in the morning, and it wouldn't work. And I hit the keyboard, and the keyboard lit up the computer, but the mouse didn't work. And I turned the mouse upside down. And for those of you who remember, mice used to actually have balls inside them.
Yeah.
Okay. And the ball was gone. And then I went to the next computer and the ball was gone. And the next computer and the ball was gone. And then there was a kid in the computer room who had all the balls. And I had this moment. This moment. I was a sporty, student. I wasn't a geek. I wasn't a nerd at all. And I had this moment that the geeks and the nerds will win. And I was like, I need to be a bit more like that. Not in a divisive, destructive way, but I just had this moment of how important technology was as an enabler to things, to productivity. And then at university, obviously, with electronic commerce and marketing coming together, or the development of all these Internet 1.0 businesses, I found really, really interesting.
So was that kind of the reasoning for that transition into Blue Digital?
Yeah. So I had no idea, Jono, to your question about what I wanted to do. But I had this moment where I realized that I just should talk to everybody I met, stranger, friend, family, friends, about what I was passionate about. And perhaps that would lead me in the right direction. And so that's exactly what I did. Had so many conversations, and two unrelated people introduced me to the same person. And he had just founded the first internet media buying company in Australia. And I was his first employee, and that's where things began.
There it looks as if there was an early foray into founding with, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Traffion Technologies. Do you want to talk through that?
Yeah, sure. So the media buying business, as an enabler, we did strategy and creative production and analytics and all of that kind of thing. And we had this I had this real frustration where to perform any measurement, we needed to go and download CSV log files out of an Apache server and try and fingerprint match using IP address and screen resolution and operating system type what a user was. And so one thing led to another, and myself and Paul, who started that business originally, and another partner, AP, we built a web measurement and ad serving platform. It was a long, in the 90s. It was a long time ago. And that was a really, really interesting experience.
And so post that first kind of taste of entrepreneurship, you then made the leap to M&C Saatchi, right? Which, what we know now, has ultimately formed quite a long period of your life there. Do you want to maybe give an overview for the listeners what the group looked like, or even the market dynamics when you joined, and what was your mandate for joining?
Yeah, so one of a guy who became a mentor to me in those early years, he was one of the founders of M&C Saatchi in Australia.
Wow.
And he was a mentor, he was amazing, and he ended up being an angel investor in Traffion as well. And so I used to spend time with him in the boardroom, and in a business context, and also in a mentoring context. One thing led to another, and the board decided I wasn't kind of experienced and old enough to run Traffion. I was getting a bit frustrated. We'd built a bunch of businesses over the course of 5 years, and so Tom is his name. He said to me one day, "Would you be interested in coming working with me?" And at that time, M&C Saatchi had two people in the digital team. They'd won the Optus account, and they had a bunch of other great businesses, and they were, they could recognise that digital services would be a great growth opportunity for them because of how important the internet was for their customers.
And so this is more of like a digital transformation project, I guess you could say.
Well, in a way it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a way, I mean, overarching, it was all about digital transformation, but there was a huge amount of delivery work. You know, I mean, that was kind of my job, to make sure that we built a team and a capability that we could deliver to the requirements of our client base. And then also we could grow,
Yeah.
you know, I could grow a new, a new revenue stream for that business.
I guess like how hard was that in that time? Because you've obviously got like internal willingness for people to adopt and adapt. You've got client demand and education and understanding. You've got cultural challenges. Like these are still early days. Like how did you manage to navigate all that?
And there's, I suppose layered on top of that, there's also just the existential threat of
Yeah.
your existing business, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of businesses are facing that today, where it's like we need to navigate and move to where the market is going, but at the same time, it's hard to let go of what you've built today and the customers you're servicing right now.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question that anybody who's done that kind of thing, innovated in an existing organization, it's hard,
Yeah.
right? It's all about behavioral change. That's all about people.
Yep.
It's all about relationships, and it's all about managing that process, and it takes time. I think, I think that's, in terms of the degree of difficulty, much easier than building a software business. There are less moving parts. Human beings, the behavioral change, people are predictably irrational, and it was a lot easier. I also had amazing support. It wasn't me. It was it was a whole collective of people. And, whilst there were people who were resistant to change, there always are, there's a lot of people behind it.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that because, when I was doing the leadership, this was obviously a pivotal leadership position. Like you obviously eventually, hit the MD of the Australian business. And I have read you mention before that, and I quote, transformational leadership is 50% science and 50% art. Good leaders focus on the science of frameworks, models, tools, and templates. Great leaders combine the science with art to rapidly transform businesses from ordinary to extraordinary. What were some of the biggest leadership, lessons you took from that experience? And maybe how did that prepare you for Lexer?
Yeah. So how, why do I think that's the case? Probably because my parents are scientists and artists. They're a scientist and an artist, and I'm kind of wired like that. But the science part is about facts. And one of the things that I learned very quickly is that it's also about feelings. And feelings are the art and facts are the science. And it's a combination of those two things together that help you get somebody to move from A to B, right? Or evolve a structure or a process or a system or philosophy to something new. It is the combination of both. It's not just about facts and it's not just about feelings. It's about both of those two things working together.
I think before we move on to Lexer, just to touch on, and this is going to be a bit of, it sounds like a loaded question, but I assure you it's not. But, looking back on your time there, were there any campaigns or projects that kind of stand out? And I guess the second question is, do you think corporate Australia has got creativity better now or worse?
Look, the standout for me is definitely the work that we did for Commonwealth Bank.
Yeah.
It was one of the last big things that I was involved in working at M&C Saatchi. It's something that certainly I'm incredibly proud of being a part of. That piece of work was called CAN, and CAN still exists today, whatever it is, 13 years later, which is, a reflection of how important and how successful it is to be able to turn one of the biggest banks in the world into 3 letters, one word, and how that word was used to drive internal transformation within their organisation as well. And Andy Lark, who was the CMO at the time, should take amazing credit for that because he took that idea and was able to implement it incredibly well through the business.
Awesome. And then, we ask this question a lot to founders because we speak to founders that either come from somewhat cushy big tech jobs or they come from the corporate landscape. But from an outsider looking in, it would seem your trajectory is pretty phenomenal at this point. Why go and start a company?
Yeah. Professional services is hard.
Yeah.
It's a people business, and it's very, very difficult to scale. In my time at M&C Saatchi, I learned that because I worked across not just the Australian business, but for a period of time I had a global role. And I learned that operating in all of these different cultures, there were various stages of transformation and innovation. And it was hard, and I found it frustrating. I knew from previous years that software is a great way to build a scalable business that has no boundaries, that has a higher margin, and is more easy to predict and operate if you get the product right. And so I certainly was attracted to that and really interested to be involved in building a business in a completely different category using the experiences that I'd had to date.
Cool. Maybe jumping into co-founders. Obviously, building a business for some is a team sport. Some people decide to do it solo, but I wouldn't recommend. And you've got, 3 co-founders at Lexer, all fairly different in terms of personality, skill set. How did you guys go about, aligning with one another as co-founders, but then also aligning on that vision?
Great question. I mean, it is a team sport. I have so much admiration for people who do it themselves, because some do.
Yeah.
But doing it together, it's not just about, it's not just more fruitful, it's more fun too. And these things are really long journeys. But our story of coming together, the 4 of us, Aaron Wallace, he and I went to Australia's first ever Twitter meetup. And I was into Twitter, he was into Twitter, we didn't know each other, and we ended up at a bar in Darling Harbour because we saw a post on a Twitter account. And we went there, neither of us knew anybody, and we struck up a conversation. And 6 weeks later, Az came and worked with me. And so we had the opportunity to work together in the agency, and that's where Lexer was first, like the inception of Lexer happened. Chris Brewer had an amazing experience being involved in building Hitwise and the sale to Experian. He joined the business. He joined Lexer as an angel investor, and then came in full time. And equally, when I reunited with the business, I came on as an angel investor. And I remember writing this thing, yep, I'll commit to working this many hours a month. And I had all these other things I was doing. I think about 6 months later, like Chris, I was working in the business full time too. And then when I was at M&C Saatchi, I worked with somebody who used to say to me, "Hey, my husband's Dave, and he's just like you, but so different." And I remember she said that to me, and it really stuck in my mind. And I ended up doing business with that guy, Dave. He was working at Experian. We were both working on Optus. We had this conversation, and then I said to him, "Hey, are you interested in coming and joining our business?" And he left a very big job at Experian to come and work for our little business. I think we were sub 10 people at that time, and he's now our CEO.
Awesome. I mean, we obviously tailored this podcast for early stage founders, and given what you know now, like, what would be some of the traits that you would look for in co-founders?
Yeah. I think there's trust is a big one. These things move so fast. Being able to give trust before it's earned, I think, is really important. Yeah. And being able to have that, that framework, that trust framework as a foundation to everything you do is really important. And that's not about being trustworthy. That's about trusting the judgment of people in, how they think and their expertise as what they bring to the business. Motive is a really important one as well. I look for that. Like, what is the motive that person, what's the origin of the motive of that person? Like, what's the defining thing that's happened to that person in their life that has given them this drive? Because these things very rarely, happen overnight. They take years and years, decades to properly grow. So motive is a really important one, and trust. Humor. Humor, you might think that that's a bit of a weird one.
Yeah.
But I don't know about you guys. I've never met a dumb, funny person. And so, and so you could call that intellect, but, humor, I think, is really important. And there are hard times, there are down times, there are dark times, and having humor, is really, really, really important as well. So they're some of the things that are, and we have that across our group. There's no doubt about that.
I want to shift to the early business because I think one of your early customers was Westfield, right?
Yeah.
Maybe just talk through like how that came about. Was that like a strategic decision? Because I think with like some founders that we speak to, it's like, if we get a tier one customer, that might mold or shape us in a different direction that will away from the vision that we already had, or it might be just too much in terms of resources. How did it work for you guys?
Yeah. I mean, with a lot of SaaS businesses, their origin story is selling something to small business or an individual solo proprietor. We had the opposite strategy. And the reason why is I believe that if we could serve the needs of an enterprise, we would then serve the needs of smaller businesses as they grew and matured. And so that was the thinking behind it. A lot of people, in fact, almost every single Series A investor that we spoke to didn't agree with that strategy. But, that's what, what's got us to here. So with Westfield, we deeply understood the problem and we had a relationship with the buyer. And so we were able to build something that John Batistich was his name. He, was really innovative, he was really smart, and and he equally understood the problem and the value of solving it, and was prepared, unlike some people in large enterprise, was prepared to invest some money and time, which is probably more valuable than the money. Invest some time in a new product, in something that was just evolving.
If I think about like the CDP space again, like putting the investor hat on. And even like spaces like people that are building within like ERPs even, there's just so many adjacencies that you can kind of build out. How did you think through that in the early days? Because I mean, looking now, I would say that like Lexer from a product perspective looks very simple, but the architecture is quite wide in some ways. How did you prioritize like what to build in those early days when I guess resources were constrained, funding was still minimal in those days? Like, did you have like an idea in mind of being like rational about what you had to build?
This is probably two dimensions to answer to that. One is about breadth of product.
Yeah.
So if you look at any software cycle, there's always consolidation, right? There's always in any ecosystem, there's consolidation. With consolidation, it means that if you end up with one product that does one thing, you're going to be consolidated, in or out. And so, we were always really interested in building out a breadth of a solution, that solved a number of different problems for the buyer, which created simplicity within their organization, and they would be prepared to pay for that. And that would be a bit of a defensive move for us as well, because it becomes harder to switch. To switch from it.
Yep.
So that was, I guess, a bit of a guiding philosophy, which again was converse to, particularly the US VCs that were all interested in just building one thing well. And instead we were like, no, we're going to build for multiple use cases and for multiple users and multiple buyers within a client, which is what we have absolutely, and we've continued to do that over time. Why? Like part of it is our understanding of, I guess a recognition of the market, what we believed was going to happen. Let's just call that instinct. I don't think it wasn't anything particularly profound or clever. It was just instinct combined with what the users and buyers said and what they did. And so often you can just look at what people say and you will be misled and you'll end up in the wrong course. Or you can just look at what they do and the same thing will happen. I think it's a combination of that triumvirate of what you believe with what they do and what they say. And so that, I think broadly that has helped, or we've used those principles to help guide to where we are.
And I guess in those early days, how did you think about gathering that customer feedback? So I'm hearing you correctly, it's all about understanding Customer thinks they want something, they tell you that. You can clearly observe their behavior because they're using the product, right? And then you've got to add in that gut feel instinct of what you guys have. How did you guys focus on understanding, what the customer wanted? Was it spending more time with them? Was it building more analytics? What was the sort of things you did?
I think all of the above.
Yeah.
The other thing that there's no shame in saying that is copy those that have gone before you. And there are I'm sure there's people that you will interview that are building something that actually has truly never been done before.
Yeah.
A lot of what we do and what we've delivered had been done before. And, and there's you don't lose any points for copying a massive organization who's solved a really complex problem in an elegant way.
Yeah.
And, it's like put your ego aside there.
Yeah.
Just have a look and inspect that. And so, that's a part of what forms your instinct is instinctively, that they've probably solved it pretty well because they've spent 100 times as much time and money addressing that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a good point of the conversation to ask what can Lexer do today? Like, it's obviously a suite of features, but what can Lexer do today? And I guess it sounds cringy, but is there a killer feature, or is there a use case that creates the stickiness with customers, or is it just more the breadth of availability of features?
Yeah. Good question. So the way to think about our businesses in two parts. There's the CDP, the data platform, the D for data platform, and there's the XP, the experience part. The data platform's the foundation of everything that we do. And so over the last decade, we've built the technology that is collecting, consuming, and enriching all of this customer data, whether it's coming directly from customers or first-party data, transaction data, that kind of thing, second-party data from other organizations that a client will collaborate with, or third-party data that gets bought. And so that data platform is the foundation of everything that we do. I think about that like the blood in the in the business. It's the circulatory system. So there's that, and then there's all of the products that sit on top of that use that data to deliver an insight, or use that data to power a workflow that's delivering some kind of personalization. So that's our the broad the ingredients, if you like. How that applies to a business, it can apply from delivering insight and helping with strategic decision making of all different types within an organization, because they're understanding actually who their past, present, and prospective customer is, and that will help guide big decisions. The marketing team's using it for customer acquisition, growth, and retention. The customer service team's using it for a centralized inbox across all of their customer service and support channels. The store teams are using it for improved clienteling, so applying all of the the brilliance of content personalization in e-commerce into a store, because guess what? Most transactions happen in store, and there's been huge advancements in e-commerce, but still businesses don't apply those into physical stores. There's huge opportunity for growth, for growth in there. And then there's sales messaging, so using AI to build proactive one-to-one messaging that goes out. So that's the kind of the breadth of data, getting your data foundation right, being AI ready, because they have that data in place, that single customer view, that enriched view, and then all of the use cases that sit on top of that. Like, what's the moat, and what's the defensive move? Why won't a client switch? I mean, there's always what the next best alternative is, but also how Lexer creates data that doesn't exist elsewhere, so that is not portable. They can't take it with them. And so that's one component. And then the even better is when that unique data, that data is used in a workflow that Lexer provides. It's a combination of those two things together. I mean, there's always competition. Absolutely. Every single business has it. But they're the two areas, of focus, of having that data that we've created and using that in the workflow tools that we offer. The whole, and then applying AI on top of that, which probably you might go there next or soon, that is really, really exciting. where we're providing an agent, if you like, that is using the data and the tools that's sitting and actually using the products, and is displacing a human that might otherwise require huge amounts of training and capability and so on.
So do you see AI as do you see it as like a tailwind, or do you see elements of AI that are somewhat challenging to navigate?
Absolutely a tailwind in every dimension.
Yeah.
And whether that is, in making it easier for users, making the value greater for the buyer, improving value to our shareholders, like every dimension, AI is like accretive, positive for our business. And, it's really, really exciting space. It's moving super fast. Whilst, and I don't know what percentage of Series A investment is going into AI businesses now. It's probably 60, 70% or something, a lot. The foundation that we've built over a decade now, the data platform that we've built, puts us in a really interesting position. And we do already, we already AIs throughout our platform, whether it's generating an insight that's written for a user, or whether it's writing content and copy for a sales message, or enrichment or so on. It's used throughout. It's kind of ubiquitous. It's an omnipresent part of what we do.
You mentioned before about value to customers. And there's one question that I feel like we haven't hit on a lot in a lot of the podcasts that we've done thus far. And that is like pricing and a founder's relationship to pricing. I feel like, especially with early stage founders, I know I've spent a lot of time discussing pricing strategies with founders, and obviously those change over time. How did you define pricing in the early days versus, I guess, how it looks now, especially with AI and all these other elements built in?
So I guess a few dimensions to that. In the early days, there's interpretation of the value created, and bearing in mind the value created isn't necessarily economic when you're selling an innovation. The value could be because the buyer might get a promotion, right? Or they might look good, or they might get another job, or that value piece is important, combined with the willingness to pay, like what the market will bear, what the buyer will bear, and related to what else is in the market. That's kind of that piece. As that, that's to get the first customer, particularly if you start an enterprise and work backwards, and then you refine that over time. As we've refined it, we think about value in 4 very discrete areas. One is the increase in revenue, so the incremental revenue that we drive. 2 is in a decrease in costs, and those costs are internal or external. Those 2 are quite easy to not easy, but relatively easy to quantify, and you can relate your fees or the value you create to that. The other 2 are less so. They're more difficult to quantify precisely, and they're about customer experience and transformation. We work with clients, and particularly even more so maybe 5 years ago, who bought Lexer almost solely because of its ability to transform their organization. And the CEO or the board knew that Lexer would be an accelerant to where they wanted to take the business, and that would easily deliver against the cost. The customer experience is another one. So just improving personalization improves the customer experience. That drives referral. You can go and read 1,000 white papers on why that's a good idea, and have a spread of how to quantify that. But that's how we think about it. I think about it like hard value and soft value, and there's those 4 things coming together. All of our clients think about that in different ways. We have some clients, it's all just about cost out. They might have done a SaaS consolidation and they want to roll 5 products into what Lexer can do in one platform. That happens too. But that's how we think about value and cost and pricing. And I mean, as these areas get more mature and even to increased degree of commoditization, it's the take rate. So it's kind of like 20 to 25% of the value created is about right. So that's another sense check that we think, that we think about as well. In particular for those products that are a bit more commoditized, not those that are really innovative. Innovative ones, it's nobody knows yet sometimes.
I want to gear shift here to people. And I do want to touch on more of a softer topic, and that is culture. And so when you started Lexer, did yourself and your co-founders aim to build a culture persona around Lexer, or did that culture evolve and mold over time?
So, let's start with people. I used to work with a guy. He had one framed print in his office, and it just said, "The people with the best people win." And I'll never forget that. And it's such a truth. It's really, really good. When we first started the business, we didn't start with the culture. No way. That happened as that just naturally becomes what it becomes. And the culture is a function typically of the founders or the early influences in the organization, and somewhat the clients as well. That kind of starts. But there was a moment in time where we sat down and we said, right, what are our values? And then we matured those. We found that some of our values were actually virtues. The beliefs and the behaviors, we had them a bit confused, and then we split them out into beliefs and behaviors, and had values and virtues. And that was probably 7 years ago. But there were lots of quarters where we didn't have them written down on a piece of paper. But you could feel them, and you could see. You could see what ended up being written down on a piece of paper in action. Yeah, incredible. It's so important, but I think it would have been futile on day 1 or day 10 or day 100 to actually try and write them down. Yeah. I know some like multi-founders will do that, and that's great. We didn't.
And I guess some of the folks who were instrumental in creating that culture were some of the early employees, not necessarily founders, but early employees, right? And Lexer, I think, is very fortunate to have some pretty long tenures in some of those early employees and some people who are quite transformational. How did you guys go about finding those initial folks? What were some of the traits you looked for? I mean, as a founder, it can be quite hard because sometimes you're trying to convince people to leave great jobs to come and join your mission, and you don't yet have that brand name. So how did you guys go about that, and what are the kind of key things you looked for when finding those initial, Lexies?
Yeah. So I think, the person who's been most instrumental in this business's culture is Aaron Wallace. Yep. Who the technical founder, the original founder of the business. He's been so instrumental. That gave, over time as we started to hire people, to answer the other part of your question, we hired people from ex-Experian people who understood data and that that were known to us. Yep. Ex-agency people who understood marketing and understood kind of creative thinking and kind of marketing and sales, if you like, and who were known to us, and young people out of university that the business had an affiliation with, or they had an affiliation with what Lexer was doing. They were the kind of 3 sources of talent. The known to us is really important. I mean, and if you look at the people in our business today that have so we do these rings. So when you're 5 years, you get a silver ring, and when you're 10, you get a gold one. And so if you look at the people in our business that have silver rings and gold rings, a lot of them were known to the founders pre-Lexer. Yeah. And so, that de-risks or enhances, de-risks and enhances what the business will become. So that's where they came from. And like referral is the best way, of course, the best way to grow.
I'm going to read out a little bit from a previous interview you have done. And you're quoted to say, successful organizations need to have a culture of delivery. You can have wonderful individuals, but a team that is aligned, complementary, and motivated will always win. What practices do you have at Lexer that exemplify this?
You've done all your research. That's so good.
That's my job. It's like, no stone left unturned.
That's awesome. In all seriousness, the delivery, you can have, there's so many gunners. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and so on. Actually just doing the work. And that's probably one of Az and Dave Chin and Brewer's superpowers doing the work, delivering, shipping. But I think one of the the most important stages of our growth in that area was Rob and Denham spent some time with us talking about OKRs. And we kind of had similar, we had big rocks and we had this and that, but she did a great job refining how we thought about, about having a goal, having it quantified, having it communicated and delivering to it and measuring that. We refined it a little bit. We decided to call them OMGs, objectives and measurable goals.
Love that.
It was a bit more into our kind of culture, and one of our values is playful, so that was kind of tied in. And so that's what we've used for probably for almost 5 years now. That's been really useful to focus on delivery. We have refined it though. I think that's something that's really important. Just because you start something doesn't mean that it shouldn't change over time. And so it has evolved over time, not just as we've learnt more, but as the business's needs have changed. And, I think having, embracing that is really, really important. We're just going through it at the moment right now. We do offset quarters, offset by a month. And, I'm always looking at how we can improve that to improve the, how we deliver to our clients and our shareholders and our team.
Nice. Kind of staying in the same vein, any unique traditions or cultural practices that you guys have at Lexer? You've obviously spoken about the rings. Everyone's always seen the merch. You've always got the best T-shirts in town.
I brought you some, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Anything else that you think you guys do or particularly are proud of that help really reinforce those companies' core values that have, essentially grown and evolved over time?
Yeah, great one. I mean, the rings are fun and, and meaningful. But probably there's one other thing. In Slack, we have a channel called Kudos. And that channel in Kudos is a place where anybody in the business can give anybody else in the business or a team kudos. And the kudos is always aligned back up into our values. So it'll always nest into the values and then a reason why. And so of all of the Slack channels, other than the winning channel, the Kudos channel is my second favorite channel in Slack and in our business to see the recognition and respect and the gratitude that happens. I think that's really, really important. You don't need to wait until the end of the quarter or the end of the year or your performance review. Recognition is something that, it can and should happen all the time, and it also should be really public. I think that's incredibly important too.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's helped with the distributed nature of the team, right? HQ's in Melbourne, but you've got folks everywhere.
All over, totally right. I mean, we're certainly not a fully remote business, but for remote people, it's even more important to have that connection and attachment and understanding of who's doing what and the recognition of those people.
So one of the hot topics that early stage founders listening always want to hear about is around fundraising. And so maybe taking a step back in time here, when you raised that first round for Lexer, did you have a process in mind? Was there a strategy? Did you have ideal investors and ideal quantum?
I'll tell you, the first stage of funding was a phone call between Chris and I that said, how much money can we lend the business and how long can you afford not to have an income? Right? That was that's like pre-angel. I don't know what you guys call it, but I just called it a loan. Or a present, a gift. And Chris and I did that together. And meanwhile, Az took a big pay cut and worked like crazy. And so that was the first step. So was there a goal? It was actually just surviving attrition, being able to keep the lights on at all costs. And we made massive sacrifices to do that with our families and so on. The next part was I had a very good old friend who I'd actually had another business with who had had a very successful exit. And we needed some cash, literally just some money in the bank to manage lumpy cash flow. And so he was kind of our angel, our next angel that came on board, which was great. Again, did we have a goal? Survive attrition, right? Don't go out of business. And, and also a commitment. We always made a commitment to each other that we would never not pay the team. And I know that might seem quite obvious, but it does happen, right? right? And we had an agreement between ourselves that we would not pay ourselves, and that was okay, and that happened a lot. But we would always pay the team, and we'd never make it their problem, ever. And then we went into our Series A, and, you know, Series A was about raising enough money to help build out our product and build out our team and give us a bit more certainty, which is when we met these guys, or you guys. That Series A got us through. And then when we did our Series B, it was we were a lot more prepared. And I must say, all of the fundraising has been done by Chris and I together. And, you know, it's not something that we weren't experienced in this at all. We just felt our way through and learnt as much as we can. In our Series B, we were far more deliberate. We were very clear on the profile of the investor. We were very clear on the quantum. We were very clear on the people and what they brought beyond the cash and all of that kind of thing. So much so that I actually wrote a criteria. I wrote a criteria in a spreadsheet that had scores and weightings, and I actually used that to brief the prospective investors. We had 103 conversations, and it was interesting just to see who was prepared to do their homework, right, and what they responded with. And that was really, really defining for us. So it wasn't until Series B that we were very, very, very deliberate about that. We were clear on pretty much all of the criteria. And I think, and a lot of the investors said that that was quite unusual, that, they don't really get something like that. It's like we were asking them to create a scorecard of themselves.
Can you double click on that actually? Like what did that entail? Because one of my questions was going to be like, how do you pick the right investor to join you on that journey? Like what were your expectations of the investor?
I think the first pass was me really late at night going, what's important to us?
Yep.
And putting it in a spreadsheet and committing it. And not just, being quite specific. Like, where do you have offices? How long have you been in business? What fund are you up to? How much is left? Do you do follow-ons? What do you contribute beyond just capital? These kind of things. Do we like them? Do we have alignment in philosophy? Do they truly understand our business? And so, that's where it started. And then Chris and Az and Chinny contributed to it, and we ended up with something that we all felt were the parameters that we wanted to work within. Because there's nothing worse, as many of the founders that you guys meet, when they end up with a business partner that they're not aligned with.
Yeah.
Because so often these things go wrong, and there's nothing worse than things going wrong with someone you've never had alignment with. So that's what we did.
As we start to wrap up, I do want to talk about your thoughts on future state, right? There's a lot going on, obviously, in AI. But what emerging trends in, say, data, technology, customer experience, are you most excited about at the moment?
Yeah. I kind of touched on it before. If there are three, it's AI, AI, and AI. And I'm not being facetious. It's just quite profound.
Yeah.
And changing, moving so quickly. And because it's not like we're defending against it, we're running with it, which makes it even more exciting, like exhilarating within the business. Using that to create, what are we trying to do in 5, 10 years, using that to create more value to more clients in more markets, making sure that we continue to focus on a goal of a global proposition is really important to us. But creating that demonstrable value to the client as well. So the AI piece, that articulates through the more agentic approach.
Yeah.
And actually ending up having a data platform, a series of tools, and then selling agents that are using the data within your tools. It's like a third dimension that didn't exist, 2 or 3 years ago. We have had agents plugged into some of our workflow tools before, pretty simple agents, but that's fine. But that in an advanced way is quite amazing, and incremental to our business, because it's incremental, creates incremental value to our clients. Because that's one of the biggest difficulties that drives churn and perceived or actual value, is actually using the tools in the manner through which they were designed, you know,
Yeah.
and that's hard. It's human, and there's error through that. Extinguishing that error through an agentic approach is a really, really, really interesting space. I think, well, I know we'll see more and more of that pretty quickly. Yeah.
So it's been quite an incredible journey thus far. But what advice would you give to your younger self, knowing what you know now?
I think instinct is one thing. Trusting your instinct always, because not just more often than not, but almost always it's right. And, you know, listening to your gut and following that. Like some of the biggest mistakes that certainly I've made individually in this business is when I haven't trusted my instinct or I haven't followed it or I haven't chased it as hard as I probably should. So instinct's probably is a really big one that I would say to myself. The second one is courage, which is probably linked into instinct. And that's actually having the courage, having even more courage to do something that either hasn't been done before or you've been told was wrong or, you know, others had told you was a really bad idea. Courage is a really big one. And then the people, you know, the company that you keep. This stuff is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And, you know, over the journey of building any business, doesn't matter whether it's a fashion label or a software business, the people that you do it with and, you know, the enjoyment that you get from that is really, really important. Like we're humans, you know, we like interacting with one another, and, you know, the people who you choose to work with is really, really important. And I don't think that that's advice I didn't, or something I didn't recognize, but I recognize that even more. And, you know, not going alone. Like I said before, I don't know how people go alone. I don't know how they do it. But, you know, that's something else, the people.
Final question. I think you've kind of nailed it here already, but, you know, for the early stage founders that are listening, the next generation, what would be some final last words of advice that you could give them?
Yeah. I think having a preparedness for failure.
Yep.
And actually being really true and honest to yourself about that. And when it happens, because it will in some way, not to be shocked by that is a really important one. It's never been easier to start a business. Like the tools that we have today, you know, are incomparable to what we had years ago. And I'm not just talking about like writing code. I'm talking about the accounting system and the compliance and this. It's never been easier to start a business. But being prepared for failure, it's like that should be default. Like I am, you know, I know it's probably going to fail, is one. Start early. I'm in my late 40s now, and I know there's more and more people starting businesses, you know, later in their life. But there's a period of time in many people's lives where there are too many overheads, not just financial, but emotional and physical, and to actually do what you need to do and sacrifice what you need to sacrifice to actually take something from nothing to something. And so starting early is amazing. I mean, I meet young people in their 20s and just think, oh my gosh, imagine that. Imagine that, the freedom that they have, and the energy and and sometimes it's better not to know. Sometimes, it's better not to be naive. It's better to be naive about things. So that's, start early, be prepared, be absolutely prepared to fail. And I think linked into those things is about ego. Ego, like turf your ego, lose your ego, leave it behind. You will make better decisions. You will, you'll operate better. You'll be a happier person if you're able to do that. I see that a lot is that, there's all of this ego and bluster and so on. The best are these people that just quietly go about their business and that, they attract and retain better people in their organization. They're probably deep down happier as well. So that'd be another thing that I would say, and I just did.
David, thanks so much for joining us on the first podcast.
Thank you, mate.
Thank you for having me.